Two Democrats vie for Republican incumbent Martha McSally's seat in the U.S. House. Who can best represent Southern Arizona's interests? We sit down with the Democrats in Arizona's 2nd Congressional District. This is Metro Week. The 2nd Congressional District has been one of the most competitive races in the country in the last 3 election cycles. This fall's race may well continue the trend. Today, we'll hear from the Democrats competing in the primary. But first, a look at the week's news.
Vice presidential candidate Mike Pence made stops in Tucson and Phoenix this week. He told a nearly full house at the Fox Theater in Tucson that the party is coming together and united. During a question and answer session with the audience, he touched on gun control, Middle East policy, and veterans affairs. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has made a number of visits to Arizona, but this is the first for Governor Pence. The 2 stops came as a new poll showed Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton is leading Donald Trump by 6 points in Arizona. The last Democratic presidential candidate to win Arizona was Bill Clinton. Phoenix-based Banner Health says it was the victim of 2 computer hacks in recent months. In a news release on the company website, officials say the first hack targeted credit card data. The second attack may have gained access to patient information. Banner says it moved quickly to block the cyber incursions. Letters were sent to 3.7 million people, including patients, doctors, and others who may have been affected by the computer hack. Banner is offering a 1-year free membership to a monitoring service to those hit by the attack. Banner and the University of Arizona run Banner University Medical Center. Students across southern Arizona went back to school this week, and in the Tucson Unified School District, the area's largest, parents now have a way to track their children. The Parent View computer app lets TUSD families check grades, attendance, and even see a campus calendar. For more on all of the top news, visit our website news.azpm.org.
2 Tucson Democrats are seeking their party's nomination to challenge Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally in southeastern Arizona's 2nd Congressional District in November. The district covers the eastern part of the Tucson metro area and all of Cochise County. Voter registration is split 3 ways among Republicans, Democrats, and independents. That means candidates must appeal to more than their own parties. The 2 Democratic candidates are former state lawmakers and have similar positions on the issues.
Do no harm. That's the oath I took as a doctor.
Matt Hines is a physician at Tucson Medical Center and worked in the Obama administration implementing the Affordable Care Act. He served in the State House of Representatives from 2009 to 2012 and has been an advocate for health care access. He has called on incumbent Republican Martha McSally to denounce Donald Trump's presidential candidacy.
I am painfully aware of the effects of historical trauma.
Victoria Steele is a former TV and radio news reporter and a trauma and substance abuse counselor. She served in the State House of Representatives from 2013 until this year when she resigned to run for Congress. She supports women's rights and frames herself on the progressive end of Democratic politics. Early voting is underway for the August 30th primary. Dr. Hines and Ms. Steele joined me in the studio last week to discuss the issues. Thanks for being here. You've both received party support from various parts of the party locally or nationally. And so I want to start by asking, how will a voter distinguish between the 2 of you as they look at this primary decision?
Well, I think that one of the ways that you can distinguish between my opponent and myself in the Democratic primary is that I, number one, am a woman. So that's a difference. It's not a benefit necessarily, but it is a difference. Also, when it comes to the issues, I believe that I am the more reliable vote on the issues that matter to the voters in Pima County.
And Dr. Hines.
Thank you again for having us here. And I think that the voters have a clear decision to make here in this primary and then beyond. And the most important thing that they need to decide on is which of us is the strongest Democrat to put forward to really articulate the beliefs and values of Southern Arizonans. And I believe I am that candidate. I believe that my experience as a legislator who's been able to pass many bills with bipartisan support, and also my experience as a physician in the community for over a decade, listening to not only voters and constituents, but patients in the hospital, hearing their stories, hearing what's going on in their lives and their struggles, connects me to the voters of the district in a way that no other candidate can claim. And I believe that makes me actually the best choice for the primary voters.
So let's continue to talk about the district. This is a district that has changed parties a few times in the last few decades.
Right.
So to win, whichever one of you is in the general election, we'll have to appeal to the independent voters in the district. So I want to ask, in what ways, if at all, do you stray from the Democratic Party line?
Well, I think that, I have a record that in the legislature, as a Democrat, it was quite difficult to, frankly, get a bill passed or even heard in committee. And that's I'm a record that I'm very proud of, to pass 8 bills in my name as a legislator, 4 or 5 additional bills as substantive amendments, and my ability to work with a 2-to-1 Republican majority and then get bills signed by then Governor Brewer really does demonstrate that I can work in any environment and advocate effectively on behalf of my constituents. And I think that that's really important to independents, Republicans, and Democrats.
And Ms. Steele, I'll just rephrase the question again. In what ways do you differ from the Democratic Party line to appeal to others in this district?
When I started in the state legislature, one of the things that I wanted to have put into law was a bill for mental health first aid. This was shortly after the shooting here on January 8th, 2011, and it was shortly after the shooting at Newtown in Connecticut. So I wanted to do something to address that problem. And so I thought, as a counselor, as a mental health professional, I could do that by bringing forth legislation on mental health first aid. So I brought that to the legislature and then discovered very, very quickly that I was not going to be able to get it passed. In fact, I decided to work with my seatmate, who at that point was a Republican, and he and I put that bill in together. But as we were putting it in, I was told, you can't have Victoria sign on that because we won't hear the bill if there's a Democrat on it. So I let my Republican counterpart take all the credit for that bill. It was my bill, but it was one of those things that I learned really quick. It's not about getting the credit, it's about getting the job done. Even with that, last year, there were more than 1,000 bills that were introduced into the legislature. Out of the bills that passed last year, only 8 of those were Democratic bills, and 2 of those were mine. And they both passed nearly unanimously in the House and the Senate. One was a resolution to urge Congress to increase the staffing at our ports of entry, and the other was a bill to help protect women who are the victims of human trafficking. And so I think I've done well on working behind the scenes and getting things done, as well as being direct and working together with people. That's what I do. I bring my communication skills, as 25 years as a television radio news anchor, and many years as a mental health counselor, so I can bring those skills together to work across the aisle and build trust and get things done.
Immigration is a perennial issue in Congress. It's something there's a lot of talk about, sometimes some action, not always some action. So let me start with just a quick question. Do you prefer a piecemeal approach or comprehensive?
I prefer a comprehensive approach, yes.
And then let me have you explain what you would want to see in a comprehensive immigration reform bill.
What I would like to see is something that includes a path to citizenship. I think everybody who is reasonable understands we are not going to deport 11 million people who are living in this country. That's not realistic, that's not affordable, and it would take far too much time. We have had a consistent Republican pushback to getting anything done in terms of comprehensive immigration reform, and that has to happen. But it has to happen within the bounds of compassion and realistic approach.
And Dr. Hines, would you prefer on immigration a piecemeal or a comprehensive approach?
I think clearly the only way to get forward and get everything done that we need to on immigration is to do it as a package, and so that's comprehensive.
And what does that look like to you?
I think, you have to look at a lot of things at the same time, but of course, we have to have a secure border where and not just in terms of criminal elements, which I'm looking at, of course, drug dealers and human trafficking, as we've heard, frankly, the gun trade, but also safe commerce and safe transit of produce and other goods between Sonora, Mexico, our largest trading partner, and Arizona, and which creates jobs, of course, over 250,000 jobs right here in Arizona alone. So you have to look at the commerce and border economy, as well as looking at security and, of course, a pathway to citizenship where folks, learn the language, pay back taxes, and move forward with a naturalization reform process, including a robust guest worker program.
Let's talk a little bit more about security. Obviously, this district is large and it includes all of Cochise County, a significant section of Arizona's southern border. Some of the residents in Cochise County say they do worry about drug and human smugglers on their property. What would you say to them about ensuring their safety?
Certainly, and that's somewhat what I just actually said, a little bit about the ranchers and those families who've been living on the border for generations in many cases. They do see exactly what's going on, and they do see the evidence of not so much families coming into the country like they used to, but now it is really the human trafficking, drug smuggling, and those criminal elements. And we can't just look at for example, a physical barrier. That's just not acceptable. You have to look at other ways to augment security. You have to have satellite, sonar, infrared. You have to have all of these different ways to detect tunnels. I mean, El Chapo proved to us that a wall, frankly, a prison is not going to hold him, and many other criminal elements. So we have to have really a multi-faceted approach to border security, and the folks on the border don't necessarily want 2 and 3 layers of physical barriers. They want security however we get there, and I believe that's with humans, of course, Border Patrol, augmented with technology, and then, of course, terrain-appropriate barriers where necessary.
And Ms. Steele, same question on Cochise County security for residents along the border there.
Absolutely. I've spent a lot of time in Cochise County, particularly along the area along the border in Douglas. And what I'm hearing from the folks who live there is that number one, they don't live in fear. They feel quite safe. That may be a little different than you hear from ranchers, but the majority of the people who live in the communities along the border don't live in fear. It is imperative that we have secure borders, that we take care to protect our residents. I think that's a responsibility. But we also have to make sure that we are not doing anything, that our border security efforts are stimulating and not stifling our cross-border trade. We need to make sure that we are honoring the fact that we have a borderland culture. That's who we are. We're a large group of mixed people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different beliefs, and that gives us our strength. When I was visiting in Douglas recently, they told me that after that double wall, they've got a double wall there. I got pictures of it. It's just ugly. And once that wall came up, their economy tanked. It's by about 75%. And they are not rebounding. So there's an airport with an eye towards coming up with a solution. There's an airport between Douglas and Bisbee that was one of the first international airports. It's big enough that you could land Air Force One there, and that's why it was built. It's no longer being used for much. I mean, it still works, it's still functional, but what if we were to make that, because of its location, its strategic global location, what if we were to make it a place where you could have like something like FedEx or UPS or Amazon distribute goods and services from that point? That would connect with Cochise College, because Cochise College has an aviation program.
How does that relate to border security?
Because that way If you have a thriving economy, if you have people who already feel safe, and you do that, you can make people stronger. You can give them the ability to. If we have an economy that's just struggling, then we're not secure. We're not secure. We don't have people that are getting involved in the process. So I think it goes a long way. But the border wall has hurt the security, has hurt the economy in that area. The border wall is not the answer, and deporting people is not the answer.
I'm going to switch topics on you both again, and we're going to turn to guns at this point. What specific piece of legislation would you support for gun regulation or gun control?
I would expand the background checks. I would...
To what? Expand to what point?
Well, so that we are, at the very minimum, the people who have felonies, people who have domestic violence convictions, people who have been adjudicated as a danger to themselves or to others, or people who are on a terrorist watch list, that those folks cannot get guns. I would also close the gun show loophole. Those would be some things that I think the majority of Americans support. The polling, the research shows absolutely people support that. And I think that at a minimum, we should be looking at those things.
And Dr. Hines?
Yeah, I do agree with some of that. I think that we have to absolutely look at what's in the best interest for public health and safety. And as a medical professional, that's really the lens I look through to solve pretty much every problem that comes before me. So absolutely. And I'm a gun owner myself and a defender of the Second Amendment. But the Second Amendment does not, in my opinion, confer the right for anyone to have a weapon at any time. And specifically, some of those folks who are proven to be violent, dangerous criminals that are already banned, frankly, from getting access to those weapons can go through a gun show or that loophole. 44% of weapons change hands. So yeah, we do have to close the gun show loophole. And we also have to make sure that folks who are on the no-fly list are also on a no-buy list. And I was frankly stunned that Martha McSally has voted 12 times to prevent that from happening, which makes no sense to me.
I keep pointing out similarities between you two. I'm hoping that voters can find some distinctions and make a decision in the race. But one other that I've seen was looking at both of your campaign finance reports. Both of you are at a significant disadvantage compared to the incumbent in terms of money in the bank today. So how will you be competitive in getting your name out there, your message out there with TV or signs or however it is that the things that cost money that allow you to reach voters?
Sure, great question. No, and I think it's really not surprising, I think, to the voters that the incumbent who was just elected has been able to raise millions of dollars. And when you look closely at those reports, you see that hundreds of thousands of dollars come from most of it comes from special interest, hundreds of thousands from big banks, the folks that destroyed the economy in 2008 and still haven't really really atoned for that. But you don't need to necessarily outraise or even get to parity. We saw Ron Barber, who fought in almost to a draw in 2014. He was outraised by almost $1 million, and yet 0.073% in a pretty low turnout election. He did very, very well. And this district, as we said before, the values and beliefs, very important. Martha McSally is voting far afield in terms of her extremist votes, opposition to gay marriage, her votes multiple times to allow gay people to be fired in the workplace of federal contractors, 6 votes to defund and destroy Planned Parenthood, the votes to allow terror suspects to acquire weapons without any sort of check. All of these things really fly in the face of what the majority of the voters of this district believe. So you can't have that kind of a voting record and defend that to the people. And I'm proud to have the resources to go up on television actually very soon here in advance of the primary.
And Ms. Steele, how will you be financially competitive with the incumbent?
Well, I think the real question is not why does Martha McSally have so much more money than either Matt or I have. But the real question is, why does she have so much? Not why don't we have as much? I think the question is, where's her money coming from? That's a much better question, because her money is coming from people who live outside of this district. Her money is coming from, she's funded by the NRA, by the Koch brothers, by Washington lobbyists with dark money. And that's also a difference between Matt and myself. Our money looks different based on where it comes from. I've been criticized because I don't have millions of dollars in my bank account. And what I would say to that is that's insulting to the many people who have contributed to my campaign, because the people that are giving to my campaign, for many of them, it's the first time they've ever given to a candidate. And for a lot of them, the money that they're giving is not very big. It might be $25, it might be $10, it might be $50, and that's the most they've ever given to a candidate, and it's hard for them to give. So for me, when I look at my donors, I know I've got a lot of them. So every person that invests in my campaign is invested in what we're trying to do together. That gets the word out. You don't need millions of dollars to put out television advertisements. That's where that money goes. You can still get the word out about who we are and what we're doing. And I think we're doing that. And I think the people know that I reflect them. I reflect their issues. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about immigration and border security, but there are so many more important issues that the people of this district really care about, like the economy and why they're working 2 jobs, and moms and dads still struggle to make ends meet. Why senior citizens are still struggling to cover the cost of their prescription drugs. There are a lot of other important issues that we also have to address.
We can't, unfortunately, get to all of them in this interview, so I'm going to give you each one more minute to kind of wrap up and talk about sort of the differences between the two of you. So we'll start with you, Ms. Steele.
One of the things that I bring to this campaign that I think makes me unique is that I'm a woman, and I'm a Native American woman. I grew up in relative impoverished area. My father was a coal miner, and my mother was a secretary, and it was tough. I understand. I was a single mom. I get what it's like to struggle. I understand that, and I know how to empower people. I have spent my entire professional adult life working as a journalist and working as a counselor and as a state legislator to find ways to empower people to make their lives better. That's what I do. That's who I am.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Hines.
Thank you. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think it's really important for the voters to hear from both of us. I think we've had a great discussion, and the voters now have a lot of information to really think about. And I look forward to hopefully earning their support. And I do believe that with my experience in the ERs and hospitals of the district, and as a legislator, and also briefly at the federal government level, working in the health department, looking at all these different levels of government and seeing how people are really suffering, frankly, when they come into the ER or to the hospitals. We don't just talk about heart attacks and strokes. We find out about a lot of things that's going on in their lives. And so really having that connection to the people of the district will allow me to represent those values and beliefs best, especially compared to Martha McSally.
Thank you again to both of you. We appreciate you coming in. Now I've asked 2 journalists to join me in the studio to analyze the race. They are my colleague Christopher Conover and Dan Shearer, editor of the Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun. Thanks both of you for coming in. Dan, I want to find out what is resonating in Green Valley in this race specifically so far.
Well, you asked Victoria Steele what distinguishes her, and she said, it's I'm a woman. I don't think that matters down in Green Valley. I think what matters for us is, do you know the issues? Do you have a plan for the issues? And then can you actually get them through? So people are looking for the candidate who can actually push through a solid plan. So for Matt Hines, he's focusing on more the mainstream issues, I think, that we have a little bit more interest in. Jobs, border security, healthcare. He's a doctor. I think he's seen as a little bit more collaborative, maybe even more diplomatic. Victoria Steele, I think, is seen as a little bit more left-leaning, and she's focused on issues like livable wage, human trafficking, abortion rights, things that are important, maybe not to our segment down there, though.
What I think is interesting in what Dan said is voters looking for someone who can get something done, have a plan and get it done. And both the candidates alluded to that, having been members of the legislature, and their ability to push bills through as minority members, which, assuming that's going to be the case in Washington also, there'll be minority members. So it'll be very interesting to see if that's a message whoever wins in the end of this month and goes into November keeps pushing, that I can get bills through even as a minority member.
I asked them both about how they're going to be competitive with the amount of money that they have, because there is a significant difference in their bank accounts versus Republican Martha McSally's account. It's all about name recognition. Can you buy the mailers, the TV ads, the signs that people will get to learn your name? What are they doing so far with the money they have?
Dr. Hines is up on TV. He has a TV ad. We don't see his signs around a lot. I was actually spent some time with him earlier this week, and the signs were due in any minute. They were literally kind of looking for the delivery person. So we should see signs up around town. They may be in some parts of town I just haven't driven through yet in the next couple of days. There are Victoria Steel signs up. I've seen those. That's what they're doing on a larger scale, but they're also doing good old-fashioned grassroots campaigning. I spent a recent Saturday walking door to door with candidate Steele as she introduces herself to people and answers questions. When I was with Mr. Hines the other night, he was making phone calls, talking to constituents, not fundraising phone calls, but, "Hi, I'm Matt Hines, I'm running for Congress, answer questions, can I count on your vote," kind of thing. So they're doing very old-fashioned type of campaigning, getting out and literally shaking hands.
And of course, earlier this year, it was announced that Raul Grijalva is supporting Victoria Steele, and I think that can be a two-edged sword. That might help in the primary up against another Democrat. I think it actually might hurt in the general election, especially down in our area. Raul Grijalva is not received very well, and so we'll see if that's going to end up benefiting her or not. Could hurt her.
On the same lines, this race has been one of the most competitive in the country for several election cycles. Are we going to see that happen again once we get past this primary and we just have one candidate from each party?
Without a doubt, this has been a hot race for years, and even going back to 2010 with Jesse Kelly and the Tea Party, and almost beating Gabby Giffords, and then Ron Barber, and then we've had some great races and extremely close races, especially with Martha McSally. So the Republicans have made it clear they want to keep this seat, and they're going to dump a lot more support behind Martha McSally as we head toward November. Not that she already doesn't have a whole lot of money, but they're certainly going to back her because there is that edge of Democrats in the district, and there's probably a little bit of concern.
Christopher, how has the presidential election played into this specific local race?
Donald Trump has managed to make his presence known in this race. Maybe he can't even name any of the candidates in this race, but his name has come up. Matt Hines has repeatedly gone after Martha McSally because she hasn't come out and said whether or not publicly she supports the Republican presidential nominee of Donald Trump. And she hasn't made statements regarding his statements. Hines held a news conference this week with a Gold Star family, a family that lost a service member, again trying to urge Martha McSally or put her in a corner and force her to make a statement. So the national race is making its name known, or is being felt here in this local race.
I want to touch on the other Southern Arizona congressional districts. Of course, in District 3, Raul Grijalva, the Democratic incumbent, does not have an opponent, so we're not talking about a primary there, and actually also does not have a Republican opponent in the general. But in District 1, that's the one that goes from Oro Valley all the way up to Utah. There are 6 Republicans in the primary, 2 Democrats in the primary. That's a lot of people. Which candidates are standing out so far?
There are names people know on the Republican side, but it's a huge slate, and now we're starting to get the food fight. Wendy Rogers went after Paul Babieu this week, and actually she really went after Jan Brewer, who endorsed Paul Babieu, and she questioned why Brewer would do that. Babieu's had some controversy, to say the least, in his past, and she wanted to know why Brewer would possibly endorse Paul Babeu. So this is going to be an interesting race on the Republican side because it is so big at this point.
And also in that race, Paul Babeu's sister endorsed Wendy Rogers. So that is, you use the word food fight. Thanks to both of you for coming in. That's it for us. Next week, we'll ask how civil this election cycle has been. Thanks for watching.